Hello and welcome to a train set edition of Trash to Track. As has become tradition at Christmas time, I'll have a look at a train set, and this year it is the LNER heavy goods set from Hornby, which was first released in 1978 and also in 1979. So the youngest this train set can be is 46 years old. And this box illustration is absolutely lovely. Look, at the top there you get the contents of the train set, and followed by this absolutely gorgeous depiction of a B12 painting on the box. Now you turn it round onto the what would be the front with the cellophane, and you've got the B12 and the wagons in there. Now I don't believe this train set's had much use at all. Everything appears to be complete, and I bought this from Trains for You in the summer with an aim of doing it up for a Christmas special, as I do, like I said, a train set most years. Now, to my surprise, the cardboard tunnel is still in unbuilt condition. Everything is there for it. I'm not going to build it. I'm going to keep it in original condition because once it's built, I don't think it will come down. And on the end of the box there, you have the contents. Now, no controller is supplied with this train set, which I believe was correct for the time. But let's have a look, go through the box and have a look at what we've got. Now, immediately it's apparent that we've got some extra track that didn't come with this set originally. But we'll have a look at the Loco. This is the LNER B12. This has got a bit of polystyrene on it there, but overall it's in generally good condition. The wheels are quite dirty, so it's had some use. But it seems to be in good nick. Everything's there, all the buffers and couplings. The tender there, I wonder if this has got the smoke unit in it sound, which it doesn't. It doesn't have the chuff chuff sound in it, not a smoke unit, the chuff chuff sound, which is unfortunate, which I think means this must be a 1979 set. We've got some curves here. I think these are first radius curves. Everything in here is steel track, but I will restore that. I'll give that a clean up and use the original genuine track for this mod train set as we've done before. There's a few extra sets of points which wouldn't have come with this originally, along with the crossing, uncoupling ramp. There's a couple of buffers. There's also a film canister. I don't know what's in here. There's something rattling around, so let's have a quick look in here. And there's various little bits there. There's an insulating sleeve, track pins, fish plates, just odds and ends that the previous owner had kept. There's also a part for a motor there. So I'll put that aside. I don't think I'll be needing any of that. So having a look at the wagons are all in very, very good condition. Dusty. Oh, there's a uncoupling ramp there as well. That's the second one. But the wagons are in very good condition. The wheels are not dirty, or not overly dirty. They are just a bit dusty. There's a couple of marks on the dairy tank. But as I said, generally overall, the driver and fireman being fitted in there, look, everything is in very, very good condition. Now the Loco wheels, like I said, are quite dirty. Everything else is relatively clean. All the print works nice, nothing broken. We've got a Smith's Crisp van. Sometimes you get odd bits put in here because the roofs come off, but there's nothing in there. All silver seal plated wheels. These are all nice and shiny. I will give all these a clean up. If anybody's watched the train set one before, you'll know I'll clean everything up. Now the white on the United Dairies milk tank has faded a little bit on the top. It's gone a bit yellow, but there's nothing I can do about that. That is just age related. Arnold Sands coal wagon in good condition. There's a Bolsover coal wagon as well. I don't actually have one of these. It's the first for me. I've got some Arnold Sands wagons, but that is a first. There's a Shell petrol tanker TTA tank wagon, which is missing the ladder. Now, originally these models didn't come with ladders, but it so happens that I have a spare ladder, so I'm going to fit it to this model. I think it just adds that little bit of finesse to it. Otherwise, it's quite plasticky. So all you'd have to do is unclip the end of the walkway, and the ladder clips in around two lugs. So that's the ladder fitted. Bird's Eye Fish Fingers van. My dad had one of these when I was growing up, along with the prime pork one. Do you remember them? I like them vans. Not prototypical in any way. And my dad also had a Northeastern brake van, exactly the same as this. So there's 8 wagons in that set, I believe, or 7 wagons. You've got a buffer stop. There's level crossing, is all present, I think. Let's have a look. We've got the gates, and there should be 2 gate posts that also clip into this. Let's have a look through the box. There they are. I've got so the crossing is complete. That's not missing any parts, which is good. There's the bit that sits in the centre of the track. And there's also another buffer stop. That's an additional one. This set only came with 1. There is a power clip. I shall give that a clean up and attempt to reuse that. And then various other little bits of track that we looked at earlier on. There's an additional uncoupling ramp as well as the one that comes with the set. And then at the bottom is the sticker sheet. Now even that survives. Look, the sticker sheet for the crossing gates, which somebody fixed many years ago, is still present in the box. Now these crossings, these clip to the straight track that Hornby made. There's a lug on there which clips into the hole, which is also used for the power clip. So I will set that up later when we've restored the train set and set it up. So the first thing to do is give the old B12 a bit of a battery test to see if it works, see if there's any life in it at all. And giving it a battery, it does want to run, but it's very, very intermittent, and I believe that is just the build-up of dirt on the wheels and the fact that this model hasn't turned a wheel probably for the best part of 30 years. You know, this was traded into the model shop having been a loft find, and as you can see with the contents of the box, it's not exactly been heavily played with. So to remove the body off the B12, you have to undo the screw that's underneath the footplate, and then the body will lift off. And in this case, it's a little bit stiff, a little bit sticky. Body shell is in very good condition. Not a lot of build-up of dirt in there at all. And in this instance, we've got an X03 motor, which has got the plastic worm gear on it. And surprisingly, the magnetism on this model is really, really good. I'm not going to remagnetize this because it is very, very strong. There is no lubrication in there whatsoever. If there is any, it's dried up many, many years ago. As I said earlier, this train set is the best part of 46 years old. That's 8, 9 years older than me. So I'm going to strip it down. I have to remove the wire there and then undo the brass nut at the back of the motor, which is easier said than done. As I've said before, the magnet pulls the screwdriver towards it. I could do with a brass screwdriver really, so that I can overcome that problem. And then once the screws removed, the motor should lift out. Now on this model, it was very, very stiff. I couldn't get it out. And it actually took some force to remove this from the chassis. And what it turned out in the end, I was having a look to see, make sure nothing would gone wrong. So just a little bit of leverage from underneath. And eventually it releases. I'm just trying to move stuff there so I don't break anything. Eventually it does release. Now what was holding it in place was the motor sits on top of the pickup wire there. And the old congealed oil had probably reacted with some of the wiring insulation and had actually stuck the motor in place. But once it's out, I'm free to clean this. Now I usually clean these open frame motors from Hornby and Triang. Now using a cotton bud with some methylated spirits, I work around the commutator to remove all the dirt, and you can see on the cotton bud there just how dirty this commutator was. So this model has definitely had some use in the past. So I'm going to clean it up as best I can, and then I get my fiberglass pencil and then gently polish the brass parts up to remove any of the carbon build up, and it comes up rather nice and shiny. Now you don't have to use any force on this, just let the brush rest on the commutator and just clean the muck off. And then the gaps in the commutator plate are cleaned out with a wooden toothpick just to remove the buildup of carbon in between the plates there. So once that's all done and the motor has been thoroughly cleaned, I'm going to turn my attention to the brushes and clean those up. There does seem to be a little bit of sticky residue on these. I believe that is the old oil from when this left the factory. I don't believe this has been taken apart, if ever, before. And there's very little wear on the brushes for a model that's this old. So these clean up rather nicely. There could have also been some, some damp affect the model because the the brush that had been resting against the insulating sleeve had actually started to turn green. So I cleaned all that off and then put the brushes back in the motor in that spring retainer. And then when both brushes are in place, I'm going to put a small amount of oil on the motor bearings. Now this is one of those motors that doesn't have the felt pads on it, as it's a later one. So I'm just going to drop it in there with a pin on both ends of the motor next to the magnet, and where the worm gear goes in there's two bearings, they both need a little drop of oil. Just turn that round to distribute the oil around the bearing, and then I turn the motor over and just repeat the process, because when I turn the armature by hand the oil disappears into the bearing holes. So there is absolutely no lubrication on this model whatsoever. So that's the motor redone. Now I'm going to put the battery across the motor terminals now, and hopefully it will spin. It will do, hopefully. There we go, it's spinning lovely. And I mean, it's quite loud, but these motors are loud. But it's spinning nicely, and I'm satisfied, especially with that magnet being as strong as it is. I don't think there's any problems there. So I'm not going to remagnetise it this time. But I'm going to set it aside now, and I'm going to turn my attention to the chassis. Now this will need a clean-up. I'm just going to use a brush there to remove any dust and detritus, and I'm going to undo these two screws in the base keeper plate to allow me access to the axles and the pickups. The pickups were cleaned with a cotton bud of mess. There was a little bit of fluff and dirt on these, so I'm pleased I opened it up. It all needs cleaning in the end anyway. And then while that is loose, I'm going to get the oil pot again and just dab a tiny bit of oil on all the axles, because the axles go through the chassis and the chassis acts as a bearing, so it needs to be well lubricated. There isn't, like I said, no lubrication on this model. It's all gone, it's congealed and hardened and disappeared over 46 years. So using the pin dropper, a little bit of oil on each of the axles. The base keeper is then replaced and the screws are tightened up. And then I'll make sure that the chassis rolls okay, and that the pickups are touching and in line with both of the driving wheels that actually pick up. So replacing the screws, rolling it on the desk there. It's lovely and free rolling, so I've got no problems with that at all. So I'm just going to add a bit of Lebel 106 grease to the worm gear, on the gear on the axle there. Maybe I should have put some on the worm gear. And then I refit the motor. The motor fits in two lugs in the chassis and then pushes forward to engage with that drive gear and the worm gear together. And then the rear screw at the rear of the motor is replaced. I also check over the wires, make sure there's no dry solder joints or anything like that. And when I can get this screw to line up, I'm also going to put that red wire there that you just saw flailing about. That goes in the insulated side of the motor to provide power to that brush. So once that's all back in place, lift the chassis up, battery over the terminals, and the chassis is turning and running nicely. So I'm going to turn my attention to the body shell. All this requires is a dust with the paintbrush, just to remove any dust and little bits of polystyrene that have accumulated in the box. And then that bit there on the front of the chassis engages in a clip in the underneath the smoke box door. Chassis is lowered down, ensuring the two holes line up, the hole in the chassis and the hole underneath the footplate, and the screw can be reinserted, and that secures the body shell back on. So now that's done, the Loco is upended in the motor cradle. I've got a power lead onto the screw because the chassis on this model is live, and the other power lead onto the wheel. And while the wheels are turning, I use the fiberglass pencil to clean and polish the wheels, followed by the usual cotton bud and methylated spirits to remove any excess that the fiberglass pencil has left behind. And you can see now just how nice and shiny those driving wheels have come up. I also cleaned the tender wheels and the front pony wheels with the cotton bud and meths. There was not much dirt on them really at all. And then giving it a test this time, the B12 is very, very nice, smooth and responsive, if a little loud. But then models from this era are loud. They're not going to be silent, not with those open frame motors. So now that the Loco was done, all the wagons were appended into the cradle and all of the wheels on these were cleaned with a cotton bud and meths. Not a lot of dirt came off these at all. And they were all given a dust over with the paintbrush just to remove any dust. All the couplings were checked, all the buffers were checked, everything is present where it should be. Even the new ladder on the shell tanker there. And I do like these Hornby wagons from this era. Yes, they're not exactly prototypical, but they're nice bright colours. And it's an attractive train set. It is much more attractive than the offerings that Hornby put out now. The thought that goes into the Hornby train sets that are available now is pretty much, in my opinion, non-existent. But now I'm going to turn my attention to cleaning the track. Now this is going to take some work. This is all steel track. It is all corroded. It is all very dirty. Steel track will oxidise over time. It's just a natural process. So all this will need cleaning if I've got any hope of using it with the original set and the train. So what I'm going to do is I am going to use I'm going to demonstrate it on a couple of these short straights. And there's a couple of extra points there, etc., as we saw before. And some of this is actually quite rusty, which makes me think it's been exposed to some sort of damp. But I'm going to use these sanding blocks. Now this is a 1200 grit sanding block. And all I'm going to do is rub the top of the rails with it. And it does bring the track up nice and clean. Now I could use a track rubber, but these 1200 grit sanding pads are less abrasive. Now what I want you to look at now is how nice and white that trash to track sheet is that I put on my cutting mat for the episodes. How nice and clean it is now. And in a couple of seconds, or a few seconds, you will see the comparison after I finish cleaning all the track. Now a few seconds on that length of track has brought that rail tops up to a nice shine. So I'm going to go ahead and do a few more. And all I do is gently rub it along the tops. It doesn't leave any visible abrasions in the track because it's very, very fine. But I did get through 2 of these pads cleaning all this track up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 2. And after all, that's another thing. When I've cleaned it, I also give each length of track a wipe with a rag and some methylated spirits. I used a cotton bud there, but for the rest of it I used a rag. And these 2 bits I've just cleaned, and you can see with a battery test the B12 is happily running on its own steel track. So this is about 25 minutes later, and I've cleaned all the track, and now just look at the dirt and look at my fingers. This is all dirt off the track and off that sanding block. But all the track is now been cleaned, and all the track has been wiped over to remove any excess dirt. And you can see just how nice and shiny all those rails have come up. I'm not fussed about the rail sides because it's the trains don't pick up power from that. But that is the second sanding block I used, and I wore both of them out. So I'm going to go now and clean myself up and clean the bench up. And I'm going to turn my attention to repairing the box. Now there's not much in the way of repair. It's just this cellophane that's come unstuck. It's not torn or anything, which is unusual. But because train sets, the cellophane does tear. But it's come unstuck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the inside gently off camera. But I'm going to run a bead of Evo Stick impact adhesive around the inside. You don't need very much at all. You don't want it sploshing out the sides. But it'll be enough to secure that cellophane back to where it should be. And on these train set videos, we're now coming up to my favourite bit, which is rebuilding the train set box. So first off, I get all the curves. There's 8 first radius curves here. They all go back into place in the relevant cutouts in the polystyrene. And then initially I get the, there's the uncoupling ramp. I'm just going to set that aside for now because we'll come back to that in a moment. And I'm just trying to work out where these pieces of straight track go. Now some of them sit under here. I think 4 pieces sit under there, and then the set of points sits over the top. Oh, 5 pieces actually. 5 pieces in there, followed by one of the sets of points. Now, as I said earlier, there is excess track, so I've actually kept 2 sets of points in this set just for now as I clean them up. And then the uncoupling ramp actually wedges in there and sits over the top, and then that locks that track into place, and it's not going to be falling around everywhere. Because as you saw at the start, the lovely photograph and the depiction of the model is actually on the back of the box. So more straight track, another two pieces are stored underneath those curves just there. And then I realised that the half curve goes in the bottom underneath those curves. So I'll put that in and then reinsert the curves. So that's the track all back in place. Then we put the buffer stop in, and the power clip sits in the accessory tray, as does all the bits for the level crossing. Now the level crossing base sits in there, and there are cutouts in the polystyrene for the two tabs to sit in. So I'm just making sure they line up, and they fit in there. It's quite a tight fit, but they do fit, and that holds the gates and the power clip etc. in place. Now it's time to put the wagons in. Now the United Dairies tank wagon has its own slot with a cutout for the top. That sits there. The Shell tank wagon also has its own cutout, which I had to slightly modify because I've fitted ladders to it now. Bolsover coal wagon goes in there. The Arnold Sands and two vans sit at the on the left hand side there. It must have been fun, although repetitive. It must have been a good job in the factory assembling train sets. I think I would have enjoyed that. Now these train set boxes are made with a cutout for a standard Hornby polystyrene tray, and that would have allowed them to use this a different loco on this train set at any time. So this polystyrene tray is made to fit the B12, but you could have had a class 29, 47, anything in there. As long as the polystyrene tray would have fit in that gap, you could have put any loco in this train set box, which was a good, innovative, cost-cutting idea by Hornby at the time. So there's the B12 fitted, and that is the train set rebuilt. So everything's in there. There is a gap for a controller, but there was no controller supplied with these train sets in the 1970s. And there is the box again showing you the contents, and I've just used that as a reference to make sure that everything that should be in this train set is in it. And there is the box illustration again, and the glue is set, and that clear window is now where it should be. So I'll have a quick look at the 1978 catalogue. Now I love this photograph of this shop window. I mean, those train sets on there are just inviting for kids. It's much more aesthetically pleasing, in my opinion, than what Hornby advertise now. And I remember looking at these as a kid, because my dad had these catalogues. And that picture there of the kid playing with the Duchess set, that always used to... I'd love to have been that kid. And you've got the train sets. And there's the LNER heavy goods set. This was new, as it states on the bottom there, for 1978. Now I'm just going to lift it up out of the way of that light glare. And interestingly, it does say in the catalogue that when you buy your sets, you also have to buy your controller separately, and there were 3 different choices. So it is correct that this set is missing its controller, because I really don't believe it would have come with one. And that there as well, I always wanted that to be my bedroom when I was a kid growing up. I'll have to try and track one of those sets down. And again, here we are in the 1979 catalogue. Reuse of some of the pictures. But again, our train set, there it is, heavy goods set. And this was the last year that this LNER heavy goods set was featured in the catalogue, as we've restored it today. So it is a minimum of 46 years old at the time of filming. So we've had a look through the catalogues. Sorry about that, I just had a bit of a croaky voice there for a second. So I've now got the LNER heavy goods set by Hornby set upon the dining room table as it should be, running round with its assortment of wagons. And what a great train set this would have been to get if you was a kid at Christmas. There's a siding, level crossing, uncoupling ramp, absolutely loads to do. And the set itself is nice and bright coloured and aesthetically pleasing. If you've got an engine or anything you'd like to see featured on a future episode of Trash to Track, please email me at dansmodelrailways@gmail.com. Have a look and get it sent over, and who knows, it may even feature in an episode all of its own. So I'm going to leave you now with some shots of the train set running around the dining room table with that lovely illustration in the background. And I'd like to thank you all so much for watching. I wish you all a Merry Christmas, if indeed you celebrate it. Thank you for watching Trash to Track again. Please like, share and subscribe. I'll catch you all again in the next video. Bye for now.